All right, team, welcome to our webinar 7. Really excited to connect with you guys all. This is such an important webinar. It's important for us to really understand a host of our internal sciences and what's going on inside of us. But like we do in FITBANKER, it's not about delivering what information there is to know, but it's how we deliver it. And it's also not about you all memorizing or participants memorizing or human beings memorizing facts and data and definitions about scientific terms and terminology, but really altering how we think about something. So that said, I firstly want us to think of the body in a whole new way. One of the ways we think of our bodies, we think of it as this physical matter, and that everything inside and underneath the skin is us. And that's what we're working on, this one piece of fat, muscle, tissue, bone, whatever it is. But actually, I want you to rethink how the body works. The body is a connection of systems. And when we don't understand that, the body lets us know when one of the systems isn't working through giving us some symptoms. And so ultimately, at a body, mind, and intellect level, you're a body of systems and processes and gears and conveyor belts, all miraculously churning to fire, click, interact, and integrate in sync like magic when we're in balance, when we're in normal peak performing condition and order. But when you live a life operating in misalignment with your purpose or your authentic nature, or you're not in your prime environment or time zone or work hours or community and your habits, these systems go out of whack, they're out of balance, and they will show up as some form of a symptom. So when we have a symptom showing up, your symptom is basically saying your body, your internal state, your internal processes or organs are communicating something to you, which needs attention to look into. And some of us get certain symptoms and we think, I was born with these. This has just happened to me. I've had eczema from childhood. I've had XYZ from childhood. I've had an intolerance to this from childhood. And it's just that we earlier on had triggered something being out of whack, and we've not paused to look at what on earth is going on with us that might be out of whack, out of sync. So very quick recap on webinar 6. We looked at these practices, daily sharing 3 things that you love about yourself. I hope you all shared something about that. And invite those of you that took it on or even haven't taken on, please type in the chat, what's one thing that you love about yourself? It'd be a great headspace to get yourself into as we go into today's session. So type that in the chat, and coaches, you can get present to that. Coaches participate too as well. And then, of course, taking on daily meditation. I have 2 very different days when there's a day that I've meditated and days that I've not. I actually, the nasty side of me, the short-tempered side of me comes out when I don't practice daily meditation, but also I go into some form of a fear response when things aren't turning out or working out the way I would love them to. Journaling, a rose, thorn, and bud exercise. This is something we do verbally quite proactively on our Thrive in 5 program that's going on now, which is going on really well. They're in the 2nd week. And gratitude attitude. It's so interesting that I was part of a spiritual course this week, some teachings of, some of you might have heard of Saint Germain and what's called the I Am discourses. I don't know who's into that world. It was a bit newish to me, but apparently they're very well known and practiced, and there's quite a big movement globally. And they really talk about certain practices that have a certain vibrational frequency. And they refer to gratitude as having the highest frequency. It's one of the best things we can do for our emotional, mental, and spiritual well-being. So it's very interesting how frequently we practice this on our calls. And if it wasn't for FitBanker, the number of calls we have in a week where we start off with a gratitude round, I really wouldn't as regularly be practicing, or as many times as I do now, do that. We do that with our kids. We do that on a trek. We do that on holidays. We do that with social meetups and workshops. And it really is a game changer. So let me see what people love about themselves. Coach Arti loves a sense of humor. I'd love to have her do a stand-up comedy for us one time. Kendra loves a voice. Kendra's voice is definitely inspiring. We had somebody sign up inspired by Kendra. Shriti is determined. I love that I'm able to live up to my daily commitments. Coach Abba, my sense of fun, mischief. Maybe Girish and Arti, you guys should do a collab. Okay, Drew, I love my positivity. Dipali, my resilience. Definitely a resilient girl. Love my willingness to learn and grow. Chaitali, my tenacity and resilience. Chaitali, if you don't mind, if it's okay for you to just rename yourself so that others can also refer to you and get to know your name. And love my resilience. Harinder, my can-do attitude. Awesome, 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 awesome. Love it. And really brilliant. I think Carol's just telling me you didn't get the journaling approach, so maybe that assignment was changed or amended by Ambika. In any case, let's have a quick read of today's objective. Who would like to read this out? Coaches, if there's somebody that you've invited in your group to share and challenge them to share.
I would.
All right, go for it, Kendra, since people love your voice.
Yeah, I like my voice, so I will do this one.
Let's go.
The Life Transforming Series, Welcome to Life. Objective, at the end of this challenge, I will be someone who has altered my own relationship to food, exercise, and myself, understands the real role of my body, mind, and intellect, knows that my environment, community, and conversations dictate the consistency and quality of my health habits, inspires and empowers my community to take their health through my social media and in-person sharing to show up as a health leader and a go-to person. The more, let me move my little bar. Hold on 1 second. The more I normalize and share what I value, my healthy lifestyle in person and on social media, the more the world around me is inspired and empowered to start living a healthy lifestyle.
And the last bit?
I can't see the last bit.
The last bit is.
Can you scroll up?
It's at your end.
Okay. Sorry. Everything is transformable. I think awesome. That's what it's. Yes.
That's what it says. Awesome.
Okay.
All right. Brilliant. I really want to share just the way Kendra read it out with the beautiful voice that she and we all love is how she read out, the more I normalize and share what I value, right? It really landed for me that actually that applies to everything. Like if you're somebody that shares and that you value people that keep time, or you yourself value keeping your word and your time, or you yourself value money or investments or respecting income and your earnings or whatever that is, if you were to normalize and share that, you'll start to find that the people around you start to also share how they value that, how they respect that, how they're inspired by you to also actually give due attention to respect to their business, to their income, to their timekeeping, to their whatever it is we share. So I really invite you guys to consider that if you want to attract a certain type of quality and flavor of beings and value-driven people around you, then sharing what you value is a great way to have them step into your space. So thanks for that, Kendra. We're now going to go into looking at what we're looking at today, which is hormones. And as shared earlier, I would love for us to really think of our body as a body of systems. Think of it as a arrangement or setup of dominoes, right? You can think of this in one of two ways. If all these dominoes are perfectly positioned and you tap them in the center, then everything will knock down in place exactly as it's intended to, which means everything will flow in the direction and the system that it was meant to flow. But if you had 1 or 2 or 3 or 10 pieces from here missing, which means one of the systems is incomplete, damaged, out of order, out of sync, or even if you have the spacing off between these dominoes and we knock one down, there will not be the intended outcome and effect, the artistic effect that we'd love these dominoes to have. And that too is true for our body. Our body is a connection and collection of integrated systems. Dr. Mark Hyman says the body maintains balance only in a handful of ways. At the end of the day, disease occurs when these basic systems are out of whack. For something to collapse, not all systems have to shut down. In most cases, one system is enough. For example, the human body is a system of systems. If just one system, such as the cardiovascular system, shuts down, death follows. And it's important we start to think of us that way, because if something goes off with my digestive system, it will have a knock-on effect on other systems. If something goes off with my cardiovascular system, it will have an impact and effect on my other systems. Similarly, in a business, a corporation is organized as a system. It has this department, that department, that department. They don't have any meaning separately. They only can function together. And also the body is a system. Society is a system in some sense, and so on. And so it's important that we start to rethink how we think about our body, about not just taking care of the organs individually, but how they're interconnected. And we want to really think about their interdependency, not their independence. Many of us might give extra care to our hair and to our nails and to our skin, 3 or 4 of collection of cells and organs, at the neglect of our liver, at the neglect of our digestive system, at the neglect of our joints and cartilage and muscular system. And if you think that the body has all these systems, in our body we have aeration tanks, we have power generation, we have filters like our kidneys, we have clarifiers, we have odor control, which we also do, we have sedimentation tanks, we have grit removal screens, pump stations like our heart, we have home land remediation, we have oxidation ponds, we have ocean outfall. Just as the way we design a city, we often say that God designed man in his own image, but actually I think man designed cities and vehicles in their own image, right? So we've designed automobiles and vehicles, we've designed homes, we've designed cities, knowing that they all need equivalent systems to what the human body has. The body is simply a microcosm of the world we live in, and the world we live in is somewhat within us. And if we can understand how to take care of, prioritize, and prime the systems within us, we may also find that we have that kind of responsibility to the world that we're within, right? The world inside of which we live. So as we shared earlier about our body of systems, there are all these systems: nervous system, immune system, digestive, cardiovascular, integumentary, respiratory, endocrine, reproductive, excretory, musculoskeletal, and many more systems within our body. But think about this: the biggest organ we have in our body is our skin. Our skin, our layer of skin is the biggest organ. And inside of this boundary of skin, we all have a finite amount of resource that can't change its volume and quantity on a daily basis, which is our blood. We all have about 5 liters of blood in our body. And those 5 liters of blood is the transport system for conveying essential resources like oxygen and nutrition, and which is what provides the energy and electricity across and around our body. And it also takes out the waste, which is the carbon dioxide and any other waste toxins out of our body. Now, if you have one finite supply in circulation, so your 5 liters are moving around your body in a minute, as that's moving around, if it is fueling the various organs along the way and the various functions along the way, if there is a leak at any point in the system, if there is excess demand or consumption of the blood at any point in the system, what happens to the rest of the organs that are meant to receive their share of resource? They will be shortchanged. So think about it this way. If you have a problem looking at this image, if you have a problem with your nervous system, right? Or if you have a problem with your, what we don't have on this screen is, say, our fight or flight system, kind of connected to our nervous system. If your nervous system communicates that there's some threat or danger, it will trigger an adrenaline and a cortisol response to fend off and fight off a particular danger. And when excess resource goes to fuel that adrenal gland, what happens to your immune system, your digestive system, and your reproductive system, primarily those three, they're considered non-essential, non-urgent, and non-survival, which means they're not needed in the short term. So what your body does is switches off those three first. It's often when we go through periods of stress that we see our immune system gets compromised, we get a runny nose, or something happens to our digestion. We either get the runs and diarrhea from our nerves and anxiety, or we get the opposite, which is constipation. So our digestive system gets impacted. And the third one is our reproductive system. When we're in survival mode, the last thing our body is thinking about is mating, right? So the reproductive system is considered non-essential in that moment as a hunter-gatherer. When you're out hunting and gathering, and you're under some perceived threat, the last thing you're thinking about is lovemaking. So your reproductive system switches off as one of the top three that is non-essential in a moment. And that too happens today. If you are under stress at work, if you are got an accounting deadline, if you're concerned around who your son or daughter will marry and that's stressing you out, the last thing that is going to be needed in that moment is your reproductive system or your digestive or your immune. And so those are the first three systems that switch off when any others are under strain. Now, our brain and the nervous system we're referring to is connected through what's called the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is this big nerve that's connected from the bottom of our brain, running down through our spine, down to the bottom of our spine, and attached to it and connected to this vagus nerve are the rest of our nervous system that go on and attach to various organs. And the various organs that it's connected to is what's called the parasympathetic system, which is the part of the nervous system which is triggered and activated. So it's the same nervous system, but it has a parasympathetic part to it, or parasympathetic nervous system, which is called your feed and breed response or your rest and digest. And it has a sympathetic system, which is your survival, fight or flight, which is needed for essential, threatening, getting out of danger, function or purpose, or surviving a particular threat. So your sympathetic is important, and it's needed because historically we're a hunter-gatherer, and as we're hunting and gathering, if you're out there trying to get your food and some other creatures trying to get you for food, we need to be able to fend off or fight or flight, escape that scenario. If there's a fire and you need to get away from some danger, you need to activate your sympathetic fight or flight system and get out of that danger or put the fire out. If there's an accident, you need to save somebody from it or respond and react quickly to save yourself from that accident. Again, you need to trigger your fight or flight response. But you don't need your sympathetic system activated, your fight or flight, when you're dealing with your boss and they're about to come to your desk at 5 p.m. waiting for that report that they asked you to give them. Or, you're stressing at home. And some of us, including me, stress in our relationships. I will go into my fight or flight state, right? And I could be short and snappy. Or on a mountain. This happens very often with us on hikes and mountains. And it's actually one of the biggest developmental areas we train our coaches on, is that we're dealing with human beings that go into what's called a hypoxic state, or they get very fatigued, that they're not now in a state to rationalize and think logically. They will be waiting to get to shelter or food completely in fight or flight state. And as a trek leader, we need to know what's going on chemically and biologically with the people we're serving and ensure we're operating from our parasympathetic nervous system. So it's unnecessary to be in our fight or flight if we've gone through judgment, anxiety, judgment of others judging us. And we need to be able to activate our parasympathetic nervous system from the mind-body practices that we looked at by practicing gratitude, journaling, self-acknowledgement. We will activate our parasympathetic nervous system. Through breath work, we would activate our parasympathetic nervous system. It's essential for us when we sleep. It's essential for repair of muscle tissue and growth. It's essential for our focus, for our calmness, for our ability to read or study. We need to be in rest and digest, or specifically feed and breed, for making love, if we want to reproduce, right? Many of us will have experienced our inability to get in the mood or engage in reproduction if you're in a fight or flight state. If there is concern or judgment or anxiety around it. Ironically, when it comes to getting pregnant, right, internally, we have this with a lot of moms that are often trying, that every month they're trying and they're stressing about whether their period will come. The stress is activating their fight or flight system. What they need to conceive and get pregnant is to be in the parasympathetic system. And so we actually, you've got to understand that internally we create a hostile environment. It's like an internal war zone hormonally when we're in fight or flight, nervous and anxious. When we're hostile internally, we're not fertile. So hostility and fertility don't exist at the same time. And that too is true in the world of wars and regions right now that are being invaded and bombed. While they're being bombed is not the best time to start agricultural harvesting, right? It's after the storm, when there's the calm, is when the land is fertile for us to grow and yield something there. Now, our body has this amazing process called homeostasis, which is the body's ability to bring our hormones and our systems in balance. But the lifestyles that most of us live is not natural. So we're often putting our hormones and systems out of balance. And so your body's continually on edge, trying to bring it back into balance through the process called homeostasis. Now, homeostasis is bringing those hormones into balance. And what are your hormones? They're this natural substance that our body produces. And they're kind of like messages rather than messengers. And every time that you eat, you exercise, you sleep, you think, you drink, you burp, you breathe, you fart, you get stressed, you feel grateful, or you meditate. Each of those actions is triggering some form of hormone to be released in your body, or keeping certain hormones at bay, under control. So there are practices we can do that can influence the reaction, the response of our hormones. And many of us think, I can't control my hormones. It's a way we are raised through hearsay. And what people say, I'm so sorry for thing, it's just my hormonal issue. I'm just going through this. We speak of it as though it's this independent demon inside of us controlling us. And what we're saying is, if you understand how they work, if you understand what puts them out of whack, there are regular practices you can do for optimal hormonal levels. Now, let's take a look at some of the key glands that release these hormones. The glands are this group of cells, clump of cells that form a particular organ or shape, and they secrete hormones. The glands, the organs, and the hormones collectively, that whole system is called the endocrine system. At a high level, starting from our brain, we have the hypothalamus, which is controlling the pituitary gland, and the pituitary gland is responsible for communicating and commanding other glands to take on certain responses or to either protect or to project something. Our thyroid glands are responsible for our digestion and our metabolism. So that's the gland that significantly influences our digestion. We've heard of words like hyperthyroidism and hypothyroidism. So we'll look at them as we go through later today. This is where your digestive rate, your metabolism is impacted based on this gland and its hormones. We look at your stress hormones, your adrenal glands, and your pancreas, right? Your adrenal glands are responsible for adrenaline and cortisol. Your pancreas is like an energy regulator. Energy in your bloodstream is blood glucose. Now, your body has an ability to regulate blood glucose from the body's stores. It can release blood glucose. And when there's excess in the bloodstream, it can take it out of the bloodstream because it's dangerous in there and put them into store once they go out of a particular range or realm. And we'll see which two hormones the pancreas uses to regulate energy. Then we have our reproductive organs, the testes and the ovaries, right, which are there in male and female, and they're responsible for testosterone, they're responsible for estrogen, and they're responsible for growth hormone. Now, all these hormones are there for our mental drive, right? And I don't know if you've ever heard people say to you, maybe lads say to lads, mate, your brain is down there. That's not far from the truth, because that is kind of the part of our body that's responsible for our motive and our drive. Our testosterone level in both male and female somewhat is correlated to our drive in our strive for achieving something. Our competitive edge is influenced by that particular hormone. And the absence of that hormone can make us lose our mojo, can make us lose our mood, can make us, tank our mindset and even lead to or be low when we also experience depression, while the causes might be different. Now, let's look firstly at the energy regulators. And the energy regulators that we have are, firstly, we asked you at the start of the program to avoid what we call inflammatory foods. Now, we're not just having fun by telling you not to eat what you love, but we are actually trying to tell you there are foods that are causing internal havoc in you. And they are presented to us and provided to us with certain qualities, certain stage of processing, and certain volume and frequency that is completely unnatural, that they're causing an unnatural havoc and state within us. And these foods, like having breakfast, which is a high starchy carb, loaded with more sugar, like cornflakes or cereal, a snack bar at 9, 10, or 11 a.m., again, more starchy carbs at lunchtime, biscuits, dinner, they're creating this blood sugar spike, which when it goes over a certain level, that blood glucose, I was saying, it's dangerous. Your body releases insulin, and that insulin is trying to take that excess blood sugar out of the system. So the first thing we're doing on this program is we want to try to bring things to balance naturally by removing all that's not natural. So when we ask you to avoid inflammatory foods, it's not a weight loss thing. It's about understanding that we're causing an inflammatory response in our body. And how do we minimize the havoc? Because we're truly consuming something that does not come in that form of a tree, right? If you want to understand what is something that is closest to nature, if you can pluck it off a tree or pull it off out of the earth, that is closest to natural form. Anything made out of grass that has been pounded and milled and shipped and pesticided and traded, and then we roll it into chapati or we roll it into samosa and we fry it, is furthest thing away from nature. It is in no means a natural state. It has been overly processed and departed from its natural state. And so what we're trying to say is to eat foods as whole and close to nature and most recently alive as possible to bring life into our body. Now, this is not just something Ronnie and Co is saying, but this is Mayo Clinic. By the way, there's about 4, 5, 6 good websites that you can go to for legit research-based science on them. One of them is Mayo Clinic, and Mayo Clinic have quite a philosophical and spiritual mission if you actually go into their website and read some of their statements that they have. Research shows that what you eat can affect the levels of C-reactive protein, CRP, which is a mark of inflammation. This was quite popularized over COVID and lockdown. It was something that people didn't look at much before, but over COVID and lockdown, when you were infected, they would check your CRP, and that will say you have an infection in you. And an infection creates an inflammatory response. But guess what? You can trigger an inflammatory response just from the food you eat. And certain high sugary, high fructose foods can create an inflammatory response and cause chronic inflammation for up to 6 hours after you've consumed that. And you could all try that. You could go and douse a couple of chocolates and ice creams and try right away to go and check your CRP within an hour and a half, right? And you'll find that it will be slightly elevated. Foods that cause inflammation: refined carbs, white bread and pastries, French fries, other fried foods, sugar-sweetened beverages, red meat, burgers, steaks, processed meat, margarine, shortening, lard. Remember, lard was very popular back in the days, till today's science, or earlier science, right? In the 80s, 90s, we caught on that this thing is causing a lot of heart issues in the US. There was a big issue. There was a big push to sort of remove and banish lard from our cooking. But I don't know why we kept all the rest. That's still nonsense and still causing a lot of these issues. And research has also shown that people that have had lifestyle diseases like chronic heart disease, CHD, type 2 diabetes, all those people also had a very high correlation with the exact same foods that are also associated with excess inflammation. So I'm going to say that again. All the foods on the bottom left corner, they found that those formed a good portion of regular consumption by those people which had chronic heart disease and diabetes. What then can we have if we're not having those foods? Well, you can have anti-inflammatory foods. Anti-inflammatory foods are foods that are high in antioxidants, which is vitamin A, C, and E, and foods that are high in polyphenols. Tomatoes, olive oil, and olive oil, by the way, cold, not smoked and heated. green leafy veg, spinach, kale, collards, dark leafy greens, basically, nuts like almonds and walnuts, fatty fish and fish that are high in omega-3, fruits that are high in ACE, vitamin ACE or antioxidants, which is strawberries, blueberries, most berries actually, cherries and oranges, and coffee. Even if you went for a decaf coffee, you'd still get the benefit of the polyphenols, for those of you that are caffeine sensitive. And these polyphenols are anti-inflammatory. Now, one of the mistakes people get from here, or if you follow the WhatsApp forwards from your grandfather, they often send you forwards that say, eat these to cure inflammation. Absolutely not true, because anti-inflammatory foods do not reduce inflammation from inflammatory foods. This is one of those scenarios where the bad guy conquers the good guy, and the inflammatory foods will have more damaging effect to you than the anti-inflammatory foods will reverse. They actually cannot reverse. But if you're avoiding the inflammatory foods and having the anti-inflammatory foods, you will create optimal, healthy, prime condition in you. You will experience more energy. You will have, if you have less inflammation, you have less of a compromised immune system, and you're likely to less frequently catch a cold or a bug or anything which is the result of a compromised immune system. Now, we look at the energy regulator that I shared about earlier, 2 hormones that influence and regulate that. So when we consume something with high glucose or sugar or starchy carbs or fructose in them, this blue line here shows you how quickly your blood sugar responds. Now, looking on the right side here, what's called the plasma glucose, normally it should be somewhere between 4.9 going up to about 6.8, 6.9. And based on what we eat, this blue spike, as it goes up, you can see it triggers insulin. Insulin's reading is on the left side here. It releases a lot more insulin that goes a lot more higher to counteract the effect and the damage of the blood glucose. And when the blood glucose comes down, the insulin drops, and it drops even lower. But the multiple spikes of insulin, every time there's an insulin spike, and they're happening 3, 4, 5 times a day, because you're thinking it's just one paratha, and it's just one biscuit, and it's just one sweet, and it's just one piece of chocolate. Each of those times, there's a spike and a crash. What happens, that's called chronic insulin spikes, equals chronic inflammation. So inflammation is the start of all discomfort and dis-ease in the body. And so we're trying to minimize what makes our system vulnerable and fragile. So we're trying to avoid the insulin spikes. We'll talk about later. Today, we actually had a great session with our coaches. One of our coaches brought their blood report, and we looked through their bloods, and we looked at what are some of the key things for us to learn and take away. And I actually brought it into today's webinar. Something new we've not had before is that we could start to bring awareness by looking at and conducting a blood test. So we have these two hormones, and these hormones are what I call seesaw hormones, which is one needs to be chronically low for the other one to be released. Now, glucagon is a great hormone to have in you. Glucagon breaks down stored energy and releases it into the system, but glucagon will only be released or be high enough to do that if we keep insulin on a chronic low. So every time you're having a little bit of an insulin spike, you're not allowing glucagon to get high enough to release. So that's why we're asking you to avoid for prolonged periods having any of the inflammatory foods. That's why we're saying for 5 weeks, if you're clean and you're avoiding insulin spikes, you will create a body that will have a good, healthy glucagon level, whose job is catabolic. It breaks down the stored energy in your cells to release energy as glucose through gluconeogenesis or ketones through ketogenesis. And this is why we need to understand why we need to keep one low for another healthy one to thrive. How your energy regulator works, looking at this image, look from the right. You have an ice cream. That ice cream goes through the walls of your stomach. It creates a blood sugar spike straight away. As soon as it goes too high, your pancreas sounds off an alarm to say, hey, mate, there's a bunch of sugar cells running around causing havoc and riot. And your pancreas needs to send out the riot police, aka insulin. And insulin goes out into the system to catch these excess buggers that are running around wild and put them in the cells. Literally puts them into your adipose cells, i.e. your fat cells. Adipose cells is the posh name for fat cells. And it puts all those excess blood sugar into store. And at some point, your adipose cells, over years and years of being stuffed, say, hey, we can't take any more inmates. And they start to resist. they start to resist what insulin is doing, and it's called insulin resistance. But in that moment, once it takes them in, it reduces the blood sugar in circulation. And as you're going for exercise, you're further reducing the sugar. And if it goes below a certain level, it again sends a signal to the pancreas to say, hey, matey boy, send in some reserve energy. And it releases glucagon, the hormone, which goes to the liver. The liver breaks down glycogen to glucose, which is the stored glucose in our cells, and it releases it as glucose into the system to keep our blood sugar level in balance. Now, if you're type 1 diabetic, this bit is the bit that's not working for you. If you're type 1 diabetic and you've learned about what you're dealing with and you've spoken to your doctor over a period of time, you'd have learned actually why you need to inject yourself with insulin, because your insulin may not be adequate quantity, or it might not be performing. It's not effective. Now, type 2 diabetics end up with the same state, but they've caused it by really getting their adipose cells fed up of not being listened to, right? Your fat cells are saying to you over a period of time, and it started when you're 12 years old or 15 years old or 20 years old. And for 10 years and 15 years and 20 years, they've been screaming back at you, I can't handle this, I can't handle this, I can't handle this. And at some point, they run out of being functional. They can't take any more in reserve. They push back, and then that excess blood glucose that's pushed back into the system is too high. It could be fatal, right? Or if you had type 1, it goes too low, and again, that could also be detrimental to your well-being in that moment. So when we say all disease is caused by the lifestyle choices you made, how everything is transformable is you start to make new, better, and informed choices. So that's how we will be able to regulate energy within our body. And how do we do that? I just want to go back and maybe share what can you do for this. Number one, have foods higher in fiber, have foods that are low in simple carbs or even medium GI carbs, and have more complex carbs. Like when you have lentils comes with carbs attached to them. That's a good complex carb. It takes a long time to break down and release in your system. But if you take wheat flour, if you take sugar, if you take lots of fruit, fructose too, can have an effect on your blood glucose. So we have to take that in moderation. And if you're ever uncertain how this works, there's a great educational tool you can buy, which is a patch you stick on here called a CGM, Continuous Glucose Monitor. And it allows you to learn from it. So that CGM is a great educational tool. It should be used as an educational tool to really look at, these are the foods, when I consume them, create a blood sugar spike. So if you put that on there and you took rice, if you took bread on its own, if you took chapati on its own, if you took sugar on its own, if you took fruit juice on its own with the fiber removed, you will see how the sirens are going off inside of your body. Just because we cannot see it and feel it in the moment, we generally feel, hey, I'm okay. I'm able to burn that. It's unfortunately not like that. But 15 years and 20 years of that compounding, one day we get a label called, hey, you're pre-diabetic now. Hey, you're type 2 diabetic now. And I was borderline that before my lifestyle change. Let's look at what happens with thought and feeling. Stress has an effect on hormones. Now, externally in the world, we'll have major life changes like a job change, relationship change, having a baby, financial stresses or difficulties that we might face, being too busy, like physically and mentally and emotionally utilizing yourself, dealing with children and family, like my kids, they really test me here. And the conditioned mind, the trained mind that works on its mental practices, healthy practices to manage these triggers, will be able to manage uncertainty, will be able to be and practice more optimism than pessimism, will be able to affirm and acknowledge yourself for something rather than negative self-talk. Hint, hint, which is why we had the assignments that we had last week. It will allow you to not make yourself wrong for not nailing perfectionism. We say this on webinar 1. If you miss a webinar, if you don't nail your workouts, if you're struggling with the tech and you're like, hey man, I'm so left behind. How many of you know somebody that started this program and after missing 2, 3, or 4 webinars, you're like, they took themselves out of the game because, hey, I haven't started properly. I haven't done this for a month. I've not been able to be there for the first 5 webinars. I'm out. And that's a pitfall of a subconscious self-judgment of, if I'm not nailing it perfect, you create an unrealistic expectation on you or perfectionism. You then take yourself out of the game. And so the values that we coach people on, the values that we say, progress over perfection, when we ask you to bring some compassion to yourself, when we ask you to hit reset and it's day one from tomorrow, are all in order to support you managing your stress response. Your brain, through your hypothalamus and the pituitary gland, sends a signal to your adrenal glands, which releases cortisol and adrenaline. And cortisol and adrenaline, when those are high, immune system is low. Like I said, the first three that switch off: immune, reproductive, and digestive. And so whenever we go through periods of stress and we're not taking ownership of the mindfulness activities that we shared in the last webinar, we're going to be in a state of reacting and at the effect of our triggers, where there will be anger, there'll be resentment, there'll be fear. And whenever a person is angry, resentful, fearful, the body releases these stress hormones because it's a repeat response that it's conditioned to as a survival mechanism. When it was in a state of fear, when it was in a state of being attacked or under threat, it had to go into defense mode. And right now, many of us go into defense mode just because somebody walked into the room and they rolled their eyes when they saw you, right? Or you're driving next to somebody, you're driving and they're in the passenger seat and they're commenting on you driving. And that triggers a survival mechanism response from you. And that's what we want to really be mindful of around how we react to it and how conditioned we are to that. And if we engage in more of these mindfulness practices, we're soon going to have mastery in trigger management, right? So that's what we really want to get to manage our response. Now, we do need a cortisol and adrenaline response. You might be asking, why on earth do we have it there in the first place if it's detrimental to us? Because it's needed to defend ourselves. It's needed to survive. It's needed to thrive when we're exposed to a famine or crossing a desert. It's needed for the most productive hours of our day. If you're meant to go and do a workout or lift something heavy or be even physically and mentally productive at your laptop, you do need a slight healthy spike in cortisol and adrenaline. And unfortunately, the way we have messed up our daily routine, when we say create your designer day, if you in your designer day had, hey, from 5 p.m. up to 10 p.m., I'm going to do all my office work and I'll go do my workout, you're basically creating a surge in cortisol and adrenaline late before bedtime, which then pushes further away your happy, healthy hormone of melatonin, which is such an important super hormone. So important that we have its own webinar, which is next webinar. Webinar 8 is looking at the role of melatonin, which is the sleep hormone, and how if you don't manage your cortisol and adrenaline and you're calming them down or bringing them under control, that you will have a knock-on effect on multiple other systems. Arti says, what happens if your cortisol levels are low? Just for a second, I'll take that question from you. Arti, is that a specific condition you have that you've been told? Okay, cool. I'm really, really curious if and why that would be low. You may want to check. I would also state that if you did a one-off test of your cortisol, which is just at a point in time check, it's likely inaccurate in the sense that it's not very informative, because the true way for us to measure our cortisol and adrenaline is normally under 24-hour supervision, and every hour to 2 hours, they're taking a sample of cortisol and adrenaline, and they work out a trend or an average. If for whatever reason it's low, it might be, I mean, I don't know what the side effect is. Maybe you're cool as a cucumber, but I will look that up because I've not really come across that as to that being low. Often when cortisol is high, I will share with most of you guys, it's one of the inhibitors to fat loss, right? So cortisol and cortisol or adrenaline being low may have to do something with your glands production, but other than you being able to bring urgency and drive and strive or fend off getting out of danger, which you can still manage without a spike in adrenaline and cortisol, I don't know of something detrimental, but you've given me something to think about, so I'm going to look it up. If any of the doctors on here know the answer to that, let me know. But to my knowledge, if you had a point in time check, it could have just been a function of you've gone early in the morning, you fasted, you didn't do a workout, and it may naturally be low. but you need to look at the trend over 24 hours for you to get something meaningful out of it. Okay, Carol has put in the chat, could be adrenal insufficiency or Addison's. But I'll take that up later. We can look at that. Carol, if you don't mind, maybe just come with some information for us on that maybe you can share on the chat, or we can discuss on Friday lunch surgery. How do you manage healthy cortisol levels? Well, here's what will help you to have good cortisol and adrenaline. Number one is sleep, right? Lack of sleep means we're performing and operating for prolonged hours on cortisol and adrenaline. Exercise, but also not too much and not too late. Excessive physical labor and training can lead to a cortisol and adrenaline spike, especially late in the day. Will not allow it to subside. Mindfulness and awareness of stressful thinking, cognitive behavioral therapy, meditation, gratitude attitude that we do, all helps. Breath work, the box breath, is a great way for us to activate our parasympathetic nervous system. Deeper, more intentional breathing. Many of us will notice, if we pay attention, that when we're angry, when we're vexed, when we're nervous, we're starting to have short, sharp breaths. And therefore, the breath is correlated with our mood and our hormones, but we can also alter the breath to impact our mood and our hormones. Laugh and play. I really only recently have realized how a big portion of laugh and my play was completely switched off. And my version of laugh and play was, in those days, eating out, drinking, clubbing, and other nocturnal activities after work, which were an unhealthy source of dopamine, right? And they led to a negative effect the morning after, hangover and guilt and shame and a whole bunch of stuff. And actually, if we can bring healthy play and laugh and competitiveness, then we start to bring that youth back within us. We start to awaken our inner child. Our whole Lanzarote retreat that we did or do around sport is about re-engaging that play. Our day 3 or day 4 on Kilimanjaro, depending on the route we do, the whole day is themed on awakening the inner child. So we spend a whole day where we're inviting people to sing and dance and play, and it creates a phenomenal dopamine high for that particular day. Social connection and healthy relationships are great for cortisol and adrenaline. There's a program we run called Healthy Relationships, and you can join the next one that's now happening next year. Taking care of a pet, specifically the act of stroking a pet and regularly caring for, caressing, or cuddling with your pet, has been seen to reduce adrenaline and cortisol levels. Being your best self and owning your truth, not deceiving yourself or the world about some part of you that you are ashamed of and disown. Like, acknowledge the parts about you that are what the philosopher Carl Jung says, your dark side or your shadow. And for those of you that want to know more about that, you should look him up, Carl Jung, and see some of what he talks about from owning and knowing our authentic self. Tending to your spirituality. So people that are religious, that regularly meditate, that regularly pray, that have some philosophical or spiritual belief and read books on it or engage in some form of study or scripture around it, have shown a healthy level of cortisol and adrenaline. Having a nutritious diet, low in sugar, avoiding inflammatory foods, supplements, omega-3, which you can get from fish oil or you can get from the algae that the fish get it from, and ashwagandha, which is an adaptogenic, is good for reducing our stress levels. Now, we do have our drive and reproductive and sex hormones, which is testosterone, testosterone, estrogen, and human growth hormone. And testosterone and human growth hormone are prevalent in males at much higher levels, and in females they will be naturally at a lower level, and females will have higher levels of estrogen, and males naturally or normally ought to have lower levels of estrogen. And for men, up to the age from their teen years, puberty, up to about 20, 21, 22, 23, will experience a spike and a peak in testosterone. And then that testosterone level, we want it to gradually taper down to match our biological and reproductive needs. And also, historically, those might have been connected with our prime years of production, right? Which is literally produced as a hunter-gatherer, farmer, working, business person, and so on. And there are activities we can do to maintain and activate good levels of testosterone release. There are activities that we can do, or we need to look out for, if as a male we have too high estrogen, how we can reduce that. And if we have high estrogen, it means as a male you will start to experience a lot of fat buildup. I've been through periods where mine has gone high. There are certain conditions that people have called gynecomastia, where as a male you have high levels of estrogen, which leads to the infamous moobs or man boobs. And growth hormone is prevalent mostly at high levels in kids. That's when they have the most growth. And as they grow, we still do need a good amount of it to contribute to our growth. And what can we do to have good, healthy levels of those? Well, first of all, lifting heavy weights with compound movements. Compound movements means you are moving 2 hinges in your body in one exercise. So as an example, a deadlift, you'll be moving your knee hinge and your hip hinge, or a squat, your knee hinge and your hip hinge, or if you're doing a shoulder snatch, you'll be, again, moving more than 2 hinges. So those kind of compound movements are good for testosterone and growth hormone levels. Sprinting, especially uphill, has been seen after that to spike your human growth hormone. Sleeping more, good testosterone, good growth hormone levels, low estrogen. Zinc, magnesium, or ZMA that we talk about, plus fenugreek, plus ashwagandha, which is an adaptogenic, plus tribulus terrestris, can contribute to good, healthy levels of testosterone, less estrogen. Staying connected to our purpose. We will see and will know many people who in their late ages, when they're connected to a business, a vision, a mission, a political agenda, they can be so driven regardless of their age, because they're so connected to the purpose, and the hormone responsible for their drive will be testosterone. But they're also ontologically, philosophically, and spiritually really connected to a particular cause that they're committed to seeing being fulfilled. Perimenopause. What would be some of the symptoms of perimenopause? Well, you may start off seeing and experiencing hot flashes, nighttime sweating, even when it may not be hot, irregularity in a menstrual cycle, breast tenderness, fatigue, sleep disturbances, weight gain. These would be a function of an irregular spike in estrogen when it ought to be tapering down. Various other, vaginal dryness, urinary changes, emotional and psychological symptoms that you can experience, mood swings, anxiety, oscillating suddenly into depression and out of it, difficulty concentrating. You'll also experience changes in hair and skin, thinning hair, skin changes. This will be, again, due to an imbalance in estrogen and testosterone. Digestive issues. You might have bloating, you might have gas, you might have changes in your appetite, joint and muscle pain, a lot more aches and pains, waking up with feeling slightly inflammatory response, changes in reproductive desire or need, sexual health changes, additional symptoms, headaches, migraines, dizziness, vertigo. All of these could be functions of perimenopause. And they can also significantly be hastened. They could come upon you earlier because of you departing from your natural cycle of managing your particular day. What can we do to bring your lifestyle and biological changes into balance? Well, a balanced diet, focus on whole foods, have your foods be high in phytoestrogens, like soy, flaxseed, legumes. They could help balance our hormones. Regular exercise, creating that supply and demand within our body so we activate the hormones that need to bring pressure and stress and performance. Stress management, self-care, meditation, mindfulness, quality sleep, supplements like omega-3, vitamin D, calcium. If you're struggling with the change, you also want to go see a healthcare provider, and it might be that you get onto hormonal therapy, so hormonal treatment, HRT, for men even TRT. Staying connected, social connection is good for our hormonal, emotional, and mental well-being. Being open and authentic, sharing with loved ones what might be going on for us. And education, staying informed, reading books, understanding what's going on for you internally. A lot of us, when we go through biological changes, are attached to sticking to the lifestyle we've maintained, which is inflammatory foods, alcohol, late nights. But our body has a way of telling us through these symptoms that it's trying to communicate something that we have got to change, either internally or externally, to ensure that we are in peak state. We spoke earlier about our thyroid. Our thyroid is the hormone responsible for our digestion and our metabolism. And you could have what we call an overactive thyroid or hyperthyroidism, or an underactive thyroid or hypothyroidism. A hyperactive, you might see that you can eat a lot, munch a lot, and you don't put on weight. You keep staying skinny. You'll also struggle to build healthy muscle mass. Underactive thyroid, like me, well, I don't have an underactive thyroid, but somebody with an underactive thyroid, you would look at food or eat a little bit, and very quickly it converts into storage, right? That kind of happens to me, and I've been wanting to convince myself that I have hypothyroidism, but every time I've tested, my thyroid levels have been perfect. But it may just be that I have a high insulin resistance, right? Because my body immediately responds to having something off. And so it's important that we understand, how do we check regularly our thyroid levels. It's a great thing to do, and get your thyroid hormones tested. And also, some of you might have been put on thyroid supplements like thyroxine. I do want to add that once you start to supplement your thyroid hormones with a supplement hormone, with a synthetic hormone, your natural gland's response is to not produce more, at least for that period. So when we quickly go on to something synthetic as a hormone, whether it's thyroid hormones, whether it's melatonin, whether it's testosterone or estrogen, our natural ability to produce that gets switched off, and the production reduces or stops. And so once we get off the synthetic source, we need to allow sometimes even 6 months or more for our body to return to natural production, but we've got to also make the lifestyle changes. So what can we do for better thyroid performance and thyroid health? Well, ways to boost an underperforming thyroid or to boost hypothyroidism: exercise. Create the supply, demand, and circulation within our body. Moderate to high intensity exercise. Avoid skipping meals that are irregular unless it's on a schedule and routine that your body's gotten used to, which is proper intermittent fasting. Choose and start meals with high protein, and try to keep your refined carbs low or avoid them. Keep your hydration up. Your body weight in kg divided by 30 is the sweet spot minimum number you want to consume in liquids, but about 2.7 to 3.7 liters of water or liquids a day. Synthetic thyroid hormones is something that you could do and you can have to manage your thyroid and hormone level, right? So sometimes we need to get on that synthetic hormone to be able to get us back to what is an ideal, optimal, and natural level. We could also look at vitamin D. It's been seen that when our thyroid becomes underactive, our vitamin D levels drop. So supplementing and having a vitamin D supplement, a vitamin D3 supplement, is a great way for us to avoid hypothyroidism. Avoiding supplements with high iodine, all right? So high iodine foods are also good to avoid if we have hypothyroidism, and getting enough sleep. Minimum 7, but ideally 7.5 to 8.5 hours. Now, we also have appetite regulators, and these appetite regulators are what are called leptin and ghrelin. Ghrelin is the hormone that says, or that growls in your stomach when you're hungry and you hear a grrr. That's ghrelin announcing itself. And ghrelin is basically saying, hey, I'm hungry, feed me, feed me, feed me, feed me, feed me. But the funny thing about ghrelin is, even when you're thirsty, your body will release ghrelin, and you will think you're hungry, and you may more likely than not go for food instead of just having a drink or a glass of water. So sometimes after we've fasted at the start of a meal, it's great to have a glass of water rather than just dig into the food, because digging into the food can temporarily suppress ghrelin and then spike it up again, also depending on which type of food we started with. So carbs at first reduce the ghrelin, but then they push it back up again very quickly. But protein reduces the ghrelin and keeps it lower for longer. So ghrelin is the hormone that says I'm hungry. Leptin is stored and released by the fat cells, which say, hey, I'm full, I can't take anymore. And so those of you that have been on a long hike or joined us on Kilimanjaro, you will see after a long day, we don't have appetite. And when we say or we feel I have no appetite, what your body is actually saying to you is it has released a high amount of leptin. And when that leptin is there, you think, I don't want to eat. I'm in no mood to eat, but it's actually a high leptin level. So we need to do something in those instances where we need nourishment to not be at the effect of the leptin. So what can we do if you want to lose fat? We want our ghrelin to be low, because if it's high, it will be telling you, I'm hungry, feed me, feed me. How do we keep the ghrelin low? One, eat protein, nail your protein, ideally at 3-hour intervals across the day if you're not intermittent fasting. Low-fat foods that are rich in protein also help in reducing ghrelin production. Carbohydrates seem to create the impression that they reduce ghrelin, and they actually do at first. But then the levels of ghrelin rebound over time, and then they even climb higher. And that's why we say, if you start your day with carbs or sugar, you're more likely than not to go into a binge session on that day. But if you started your morning with protein as the first thing, or a good fat like an MCT oil in your coffee, right, you're less likely to turn into binge eating or trigger carb cravings across the day. Carb consumption triggers carb cravings. Sugar consumption triggers sugar and carb cravings. And so if we avoid the trigger of the ghrelin suppression and spike, we will have a lot more of a better day. What can we do to increase leptin? Leptin is the one that comes from our fat cells, which says, I don't want any more, I'm done. Well, increasing physical activity. So a simple mind will think, hey, if I work out so much, I need to eat more. But actually, if you go past 90 minutes, which is something of endurance, if you go for a 90-minute walk, a 90-minute hike, you will likely spike up your leptin levels, at the end of which you'll find you're not as hungry as you thought you would be. And we find that on our hikes that we used to do in London. We used to create what we call trek and treat days. So we would trek the whole day, 16 kilometers, 18 kilometers, 22 kilometers. At the end of it, we've planned to just snack along the way, not have lunch, but then we go for a big supper somewhere, and we go to a pub and we try to eat and order all the junk. And we find that we ordered pizzas and this and that. And everyone just ate very little. They didn't kill it. And we discovered this kind of the good way or the hard way, which is after multiple hikes, we're like, man, we're over ordering, because we're ordering from our eyes, we're ordering from a central taste-based desire. But then the body couldn't consume all that. And people found that actually on their hike days, they got full really quick. That's because their leptin levels were elevated. Getting enough sleep will keep leptin high, decreasing your sugar intake, more fish or omega-3 in your diet, green tea extract, and you can also have supplements that have green tea extract, berries, unsweetened beverages, green veg. They help with keeping our leptin high and healthy. Now, the last system we will look at is our waste management system. As we have in a city, we also have in our body. Every time your body consumes something that your body disagrees with, your body is going to try its best to reject and eject it. And you found that when you drink too much alcohol on a particular night on an empty stomach, it's not uncommon that you turn to projectile vomiting. Or the other way, like you've drunk loads, you filled yourself with alcohol, and then you put food while that alcohol is not yet digested or processed, and it will have you eject or reject that food that we've consumed at the end of that particular day. And this is our body's survival mechanism to say, you've put a non-natural substance in me. Like alcohol, there's no part of alcohol that's natural. Like it's not designed to be broken down by our stomach acids and enzymes. Our gut bacteria get high off their face. They're not used to consuming that amount of alcohol, right? They don't, right? So when we present our body with that, we are literally putting something foreign in our body. You might as well put down a copper coin or a piece of plastic in you, because they have the same response. Your gut bacteria and your stomach enzymes don't naturally break these down. And so when we consume something that the body doesn't like, it's going to quickly want to pee it out or poo it out or puke it out. And if it doesn't go out of those 3 P's, it goes out from the 4th P, which is the pores of your skin. And this is why we get things like flushing. This is why we get things like eczema or psoriasis. This is why we will get things like hair loss or zits or pimples. It's a function of something at an unacceptable and unwelcome level in our body that your body is trying to eject or reject. And you just need to look at, what have I consumed today? Like I have that effect with certain pickles, right? And it might be the oil that's used in that particular pickle, and it leads to a breakout on my face. And I think it's spicy foods. But if I had that same spicy chili on its own, not doused in the cheap oil that might have been used, I don't have the breakout, right? So it's very important that we start to learn and understand. And then there are particular brands of pickle that I have where I know that particular manufacturer, they use whatever oil they're using some tank oil that my body doesn't like, and it leads to a breakout for me. And so we've got to understand what are the sources. So we got to do this. When you go and see a medical professional, they're going to first go through process of elimination. They'll ask you to avoid or eliminate all the kind of allergen / list of intolerant foods, and slowly reintroduce one by one every 2 weeks. Normal, regular suspects are dairy, spices, oil, certain oils, sugar, gluten. So these will be the first things that we want to look at. If you have some form of intolerance, regular eczema, some kind of rash, hair loss, breakout, like sometimes we get ulcers in our mouth or on the scalp of our head, this is your body communicating to you that something is unwelcome. Including, by the way, bad breath is not always at our teeth. It often comes from our digestive tract, that there's something there that is rotting and there's some sedimentation that is unwelcome. It's not being digested, and so it is projecting itself from there. You can literally sense, if you really bring a heightened awareness, when your breath smells, when your farts smell, meaning you can't fart without them smelling, then is an indication that there's something inside of you that isn't home, isn't meant to be there, right? So listening to your body, the sounds and scents will be communicating to you that something in there isn't in alignment. All right, cool. To wrap up today, guys, these are the assignments. I invite you guys, first of all, to watch these 2 amazing talks, How Food Affects Your Hormones, a great talk to watch, really good one. I should put the doctor's name, I keep forgetting his name. And The Connection Between Stress and Disease, which is Dr. Gabor Mate. This guy, Dr. Gabor Mate, is an absolute genius. He's an absolute genius, probably, of our times, somebody who is so connected to the science of trauma. And trauma is not that we've gone through something dramatic as conveyed in a Hollywood or Bollywood movie, but trauma could be something as simple as you went to high school and people laughed at you because a girl rejected you or a boy rejected you, or they mocked the zits on your face, or your mom said that you weren't as good as your sibling. Just those kinds of statements can be traumatic for a young mind and child. And Dr. Gabor Mate really talks about how that story and statement on repeat is a form of stress that causes dis-ease. So it's a great talk for us to watch. And also how foods affect your hormones. I would invite you to watch both with a pinch of salt and with your own analytical mind. So question it, judge it, don't take anything blindly. Question whether that makes sense for you. Try out some of what's being said, especially around the food stuff, and then see if it makes a difference to you if you are at the effect of hormones. Now, number 2 is optional, but this is a new assignment, and we've never had it as an assignment. I brought it in September 2024 for the first time, which is a lot of people from time to time come to us, and then they're often reactive, which is like, hey, Ronnie, I've got this issue. My doctor says I'm deficient in this, or I've got this, and now I have to go for blood tests. And unfortunately, we don't have a benchmark to compare to when we were in our peak state. Now, some of you all have already joined this program because you've gone through some illness, disease, or symptom, and you've had blood tests, and your doctor says, hey, matey boy or matey girl, you've got to change your lifestyle. And then someone told you about FITBANKER and you signed up. And now would be a great time, 8 weeks in, 9 weeks into your program, to really look at what has shifted. And even if you've never had an underlying blood or hormonal condition or illness or disease, it's also good if you're feeling really at your peak state to know that when I'm in my peak state, this is my reading for my full blood count. This is where my hormones like testosterone, estrogen, and thyroid hormones are. This is where my vitamins, specifically D and B12, I'd love for you guys to check and test. This is how my blood sugars and my fasted insulin test reading is. This is my lipid profile, which is your cholesterol test says. This is how my liver is performing. This is how my kidney is performing. It's important that we do this at some point in time so we have a benchmark of what the levels were when we were good. Because later down the line, we might find that we've eaten something wrong, you excessively got into a period of drinking, and then it significantly deteriorated your liver. And you will think, and I have people saying this to me, Ronnie, you don't understand. I've just got this chronic immune system issue. I've got this chronic liver issue. My creatine levels are always too high. I've always had that. And I say, well, have we checked when you're in your peak state? And it's important to have a benchmark to compare to when we're in our peak state. So this is an invitation if you can do it. If you're in Kenya or Zambia, you can do this at Metropolis Labs, 1 to 2 days, or India, Metropolis Labs, 1 to 2 day turnaround. In India, actually, there are labs around every corner that you can do this at. In the US or UK, there are some concepts that have come around where you can do a self-test. They send you a little device, you do a prick test, you put it on a swab. I don't know how accurate it can do all these tests, but there are some people that have done this, and it's important for you to know. And some of them are gimmicks, which is they make you do the test so then they can plug you the plan that they want to give you thereafter. But it's important that you can go, if you can, find a place that will give you a full blood test. You can tell your GP, so long you're not taking the piss from the NHS, that, listen, I just need once off a full record of what's going on for me internally. I want to bring heightened awareness to me, and they should gladly allow you to be able to do those tests. You have to specify the hormones because those don't happen by default, which is testosterone, estrogen, thyroid hormones, unless there is a symptom. So you have to specifically ask for it. Then we have day 60. When is day 60, Carol? Is it tomorrow or is it on Tuesday? Tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
Awesome, guys. Looking forward to your day 60 progress updates. I want to share as well. We've just opened the January program. I know some of you might have already signed up to the January program. So big kudos to you for, seeding your future and locking that in. And we have other people that have already signed up to the January challenge. So that's gone live. As a heads up, we were not going to go live with our January program, but we've had meaning we're looking at a slight modification to the way we deliver our programs. That will be a bit more longer term and subscription based, but till the system is in place, we'll continue to open up our 90-day program. So for now, the January program is open. And yeah, for those of you that want to lock in that future and not overthink it, you can go ahead and sign up. Remember, as an anchorer, if it's the first time you're doing a program, anchoring is, about 30-40% the cost of what you might have paid. We also have an invitation to lead, which is to find out and discover about the coaching body. Coach Carol and anyone that's in London, can I ask, have you guys shared the details about the brunch meetup for the coaching body that's happening this Sunday?
I sent it out a few days ago. I'll resend it.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I'll just check with Vera for the updated message for the invite, because there's a bit more specifics that we've flagged in there. For those of you that want to find out, if you're in London, in Hammersmith at the Elder Press Cafe, there's going to be an in-person meetup this Saturday, 10:30 a.m. There's a brunch and drink included, so it's like there's only 30 places, but it's a great way to meet along the riverfront in Hammersmith, maybe get a good walk in after that and connect with others as we wrap up our year. And there will be some entrepreneurs who have come out of our coaching body community sharing their entrepreneurial journeys and stories. So it's great for you to meet and know a bit more of people outside of your challenge and see what else is going on and find out about the coaching body. The next batch, once it's closed, it closes, is on 14th November, which is next week, Saturday. So I would love for you guys that would like to be part of it to join. The next HR program is next year in February, but their masterclasses are going on. You can go to this link, fitbanker.com/HR. Ambika's running only 3 of those a year. So if you want to find out about that one, join the next upcoming masterclass, or you can sign up for it right away. Today's session was about hormones and knowing that your hormones are not out of control. If you can control your hormones, you can control your life. On that note, it is a wrap. Thanks all for being on today's session. I'm going to stop share and we'll take any questions. Any questions from anyone or comments?
Hey, Ronnie, if we do get our labs done, were you inviting all of us to like post them on the group chat for analysis or bring them to surgery lunch?
That will be completely optional. It's definitely not a requirement to share them. I would also invite you guys to first look at your blood work and check it before you share it, because last thing you want to find out is that you don't read the detail and one of your teammates reveals to you that you've got some terminal condition. Hoping not, but it's always good for us to check. And you can, like I remember when I would go around telling people, hey, I had a hepatitis X, and I used to keep mixing up the letter, and everyone would be looking at me like, oh man, what have you been up to? And obviously they would judge me on the one that you get through sexual contraction, and the one I had was through food, right? So I was quite misjudged, sharing which kind of hepatitis I had. So I would invite all of us to definitely first look at your own, but all blood reports that you will get will generally give you what's called the optimal range and something that's out. Again, depending on the region and country you're in, the units of measure and the mode of testing or conversion changes based on the approach and methodology they use, but it should tell you where something is out of the ordinary range. I would first invite you to sort of look and inquire and question what that is, but you can come on a surgery for sure and ask me. If there is something specifically you want me to look at, you can share with me your blood reports. Tell me, hey, can you check my level for this? What can I do about that? Right? And it is so important to be able to do this now. I randomly found, as we were digging up some of our old stuff and boxes that we shifted from the UK, that in 2011, 4 years before FITBANKER, I had gone in for some bloods and they did a full bloods on me. I didn't know this. And it's just amazing to see when I was coping through life and unsymptomatic, this is 3-4 years before being hospitalized, how many of things were so out of optimal, but they're not a big issue for the doctor. The doctor was like, be mindful of this, otherwise you'll have to start medication. And when you ask, what can I eat, that go to Google and print out a few sheets of vegetables and give that to me, say, eat these. And that's how, I stayed the same. It was never articulate enough, direct enough, or specific enough to say, this is the thing you need to specifically avoid. This is the stuff you need to have this quantity and this quality of, and how frequently you need to have that, right? It was a very generic advice. And that same doctor, when I went through my transformation and I walked in post my transformation, I said, I want to do my bloods again and see what's improved. I remember him looking at me like I'm some immigration scam job. He didn't know I was the same guy because my face had changed, my bone structure changed, everything shifted. And he couldn't believe, looking at the blood reports and looking at my face. He didn't recognize me. He thought I'm some other bloke who's coming on my name to do these tests. So I really do recommend that we do check this out. Sachi, did you just encore on the Jan challenge? I think you did. All right. Awesome, guys. Well, thanks all for being here. Sachi just encored to Jan challenge. Well done, Sachi. And just got the notification pop up on my phone that somebody signed up. So superb stuff. And that is an awesome way to lock in already one of our New Year's resolutions. So thanks all for being on. And I look forward to connecting with you guys. Friday lunch surgery. Before I wrap this up, we have Thrive in 5. We're inviting Thrive in 5ers to come on Friday surgery just to experience what the surgery is like. So I want to encourage as many of you to come on Friday surgery to kick off, ask your questions, share your shares. Some of them are people who've never done a 90-day program, so they want to get a sense of what happens on these Friday surgeries. They don't have the same on the Thrive in 5. They have what are called empowerment calls, but those are more one-directional, and it isn't so much the technical stuff that we look at on a 90-day program where you bring your macros, you bring your body fat. So I do encourage as many of you, if you have something to ask on Friday, please be on time right at the start, so we could start off with the September challenge, and you might inspire the Thrive in 5ers to join you in January. So look forward to seeing you guys on Friday, and by then we'll also be discussing your day 60 update, so you could share what's possible in 60 days on Friday's call. So looking forward to connecting with you all. Thanks all, and bye.